hello. I'm doing well. Enjoying my time off, as I'm sure you are as well. Yeah. Mhm. Mm, yeah. Well, you've got generals coming up, so um, uh, I've been mostly I've spent my time a lot of my time trying to catch up on a lot of reading and film watching. I don't get done during the school year, so catch up on what else is going on in the arts world. Um, I just went to see this is we're getting off topic, but I just went to see Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which was a fantastic film. So fantastic that I forgot to pay attention to the score and would bring back a report on the score if I had actually paid attention to it. So, um, uh, but yeah, we're not an IMAX, but I did see it again. Um, although we have the St. Louis Science Center here, just about 30 minutes from my house, and I believe they're showing it on the OmniMax Theater. Which, for those of you if you haven't been to St. Louis, we have you do we have this. It's essentially a dome-shaped theater. That's in the science our big science center that we have here in St. Louis.
So, really quick,
Like
this is embarrassing. I, w- I was muted that whole time. So sorry.
For those of you who didn't hear what Zach said, we will recap it quickly. Hello, welcome to Composer Talk. Woohoo! I've been working, even though it's my break for some reason,
Pretty
and
much.
hate the OmniMax.
Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty much it.
but no, but the OmniMax theater, it's like a dome shaped theater, almost like a planetarium or something, although not that big. But it's
Not
like
how movies are meant to be watched.
it's this big domed screen, and you sit there just looking up.
It's so stupid.
It's usually they show like educational films and like independent films and stuff there, but occasionally, mostly like educational stuff. But occasionally, when there's like a really big movie like Star Wars, they'll show it in OmniMax, and it's awesome.
No, it's not. It's genuinely not. He's lying. Like I used to hate going to that thing when I was a kid. Even it was genuinely the worst.
Jack, you're the person who I would most expect to love the OmniMax. Like,
I hate it. It's not. It distorts the format. It's just not good. Like that's why I don't like things that distort the original format. Like I'm the king of overdoing things, but there comes a point where the format gets distorted, and it's just like, okay, this isn't how they intended me to see the
so
film.
so you're okay with the really big screen, you just don't like the dome.
I don't like the dome and the curve, and it's not so much the dome; it's mostly the curve that comes with it.
Okay, I do get it, and I kind of agree. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend OmniMax viewing for your first viewing of Star Wars, but I feel like just for
Or
the
any.
occasion, I kind of want to go see it. Although the tickets are kind of expensive, so
Just see it in
but
IMAX.
there's still a bunch of movies from this year that I want to see, like The Shape of Water and Lady Bird. So
Well, I have not had as much time to go to the theater because I've been doing general exam stuff and
yeah.
all sorts of stuff. But either way, anecdotal stuff aside, so we've got a few news topics for you guys, and then we thought we would kind of close out. I know it's technically the beginning of 2018 now, but we were talking about, and we really kind of wanted to do just a kind of year in review type thing. We just wanted to kind of surmise the big news topics that were either divisive or have a lot of impact going forward, and even just some of the major things that happened in the world of composition from 2017. It was a fairly eventful year, so yeah. So let's roll right into news topics. You want to take this first one,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
seat of
So
honor?
Spotify has gotten themselves sued again. This time, they're being sued by Wixton Music Publishing. on behalf not of the of recording companies, but on behalf of publisher and songwriter rights. The accusation here is that although Spotify is doing presumably doing all their legal duties to pay recording companies, the lawsuit claims that Spotify failed to address the claims of songwriters who also own like separate rights to these songs that go on the streaming service. So they are paying rights to the recording companies, but not actually to the real artists, which is a problem. At least this lawsuit claims. The article I looked at is on BBC News. Says that there was a similar suit in 2016 with filed by the National Music Publishers Association, and they reached a $30 million settlement. So it never actually got resolved in court. It was resolved out of court. But Spotify contests the lawsuit, so we'll see how this plays out.
Probably not in Spotify's favor, because, I mean, we'll cover this in the 2017 year in review, but Spotify has not had the best year. So it's probably not going to go their way.
Right.
You know, well, here's hoping that goes the correct way. I'm not wishing ill on anyone, obviously, but I really want it to go the correct way, and the correct way is against Spotify in this case, nearly 100%. So next we've got Jacob and I are both here at the University of Oklahoma, and something kind of cool happened for us. Obviously, we were participating in the Rose Bowl and all that for our football team. Apparently, I don't know, I don't watch, but apparently the animation director and storyboard supervisor for some of Disney's biggest kind of out of the left-wing movies, such as Big Hero 6 and Frozen. His name's Paul Briggs, and he saw the OU Pride of Oklahoma marching band because apparently he heard them from where he was working, and so he went and he just sat in on the rehearsal because our team was playing so close to Disney, and he did this sketch, and it's not directly composition related, but I've got it up on the screen right now. I just think it's actually really kind of cool because, I mean, to have a major animation director sit there and just do this kind of for fun, everybody's kind of making jokes, when are they going to make a music themed or a marching band, Disney Pixar movie?
Oh, yeah, the website that originally shared this. I would be in favor of that if it's a Pixar movie. I'm afraid that Disney's animation studios, apart from Pixar, might just make it really sad.
Depending on... Because, yeah, they do have a lot of animation studios. Pixar is kind of the big one, because obviously, back in the 80s, they acquired, like, half of the digital effects team from Lucasfilm. And that's kind of where they all came from. But so they're very talented, but I do agree, if it didn't go to Pixar, it'd almost be criminal. However, regardless, it's really cool that this has the potential now of being put in the public eye. So, I don't know, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I think it's so that's just a final anecdotal thing, not really news, but I just thought it was fun, and I think it's cool. But yeah, so you can check that out if you just Google OU marching band animation director. It comes up on Google searches now, so you can easily find it. So 2017, we had quite a bit happen between kind of the tail end of 2016 through the 31st of 2017. It's been fairly eventful. I mean, before we dive into what we've got here, I mean, Jacob, what do you think? Wasn't it a pretty eventful year? I mean, I know that you kind of were reaching your compositional maturity at that point, obviously, because you were graduating, so you were focused on other things, but, I mean, you probably noticed a lot more happening than in previous years. I know I did.
Well, lately there's been... And maybe it's just because we've talked about it a lot on here that it's in the forefront of my mind. But there's really been a lot of it's really been eventful in terms of copyright and songwriter rights issues. There's some items on here that we're gonna go over.
Right, and that's stuff that's been here for a couple of years. But this year's been really big on it.
Right. And I think things are starting to boil over a little bit to the point where they're going to have to be resolved. I mean, we've had we've had at least one new copyright law be proposed. We've had suits against Spotify, agreements between it with ASCAP and YouTube that we have that you probably want to talk about a little later.
Right.
But I mean, just a lot on that front, and I think it may be that the issues with music and music rights and copyright issues in the digital world have been there for a long time, and I think it may be that people are finally starting to try to actually do something about it, instead of hunkering down into their camps or don't steal our music while doing nothing to
finally fighting back, basically.
Dissuade the stealing of your music, whether that be just market strategies or whatnot, and then on the other side of those who want to steal music and haven't really been cooperating with organizations and companies to work to a mutually beneficial end, because it's not like everybody who pirates music wants to pirate music. If you find legal channels that people think are beneficial for them in their own self-interest, they will use them.
And that's where we'll split hairs, because I don't think there's an excuse. Unaccessible to you? Too bad.
I'm not saying it's right. But
just I'm very firm against it. Like, I don't think there's any excuse. I don't think there's any justification. But either way, so let's for me then, kind of the same thing. There's been a lot of progress on that front. I mean, for me, there were a couple of kind of long-term things I was following that kind of hit ahead over the summer, which we'll get into. Just sort of long-term things about, composers' rights and, employment and all that. So, yeah, I think it was a very interesting year. I've been following this stuff for several years just because it's always been interesting to me. But, it's just, I think this year, a lot of it just came to a head. And I think part of that is just the social media explosion that happened in 2016 or 2015, right. 2016, depending on who you ask. And I think that social media explosion helped bring out that these were problems. But, so let's jump right into the year in review. We've wasted enough time talking about each other and all that. So, probably what I think is probably the most significant thing for composers directly is just, this was Dorico's first full year. And the reason why it's significant, other than, obviously, I love Dorico, is just they have completely shifted the paradigm that used to exist of, well, you go Sibelius or Finale. Well, I don't like Sibelius and Finale. Well, that's all you get. And the companies have been sitting on their laurels for so long, they haven't had any direct competition. Their nearest competition after that would be, I would say, either... There's a really weird program that I tried once called like Final something, and then MuseScore, and even those are 10,000 leagues behind. So
Notes, Words, Lilypad.
Yeah, exactly. Like things like that. They're 10,000 leagues behind. But then here comes Dorico with a lot of hype, mind you, comes through, and now at the end of their first full year, it's completely analogous to Sibelius and Finale, and anything that Sibelius and Finale do, it does better. Literally, the only thing it's missing right now are drum set cues. And that's a really niche thing to need. And it's actually coming, because they've got the drum set, they've got the cueing, they just want to wait to do it right, and they said to expect it, they're saying something like February or something. So, the notation world has just been taken by storm by the, success, really, of Dorico, and it's catching on more and more, because some people were waiting for certain features, some people were just waiting to not be an early adopter, and I don't know, I think it's got significant ramifications going forward, because I think Finale and Sibelius, they're in deep trouble. I think both of them are just kind of looking like, well, I mean, they've been caught with their pants down. They don't know what to do. I mean, they haven't really had a legitimate response. Sibelius I think they updated some of their sound patches that are included in the base program.
Right.
I mean, they didn't really do much. And Finale, they actually didn't do anything. They released a crawler update of like, I want to say it was their third crawler update of this year. It still didn't do anything major. It just fixed how some things aligned. I mean, that's stupid. Dorico is doing more every month than Sibelius or Finale do an entire year. And I think that that's going to carry forward, and either Sibelius and Finale will, you know, kind of meet the expectations of their target audience, or they're gonna collapse. And I think that next year will be the real telling point of that.
I think Sibelius and Finale are going to hang on for a little while longer. I mean, both formats have a user base of probably mid-career composers who are maybe not looking to switch at the moment. You know, they're comfortable with the software, and that's what they use. Now, how long can you hang on inertia is the question there, and I don't know how long that is. And Finale, I mean, they also have the editors who use that a great deal. So Finale does have that advantage, not from composers specifically.
What's actually really funny, I was reading a story. I actually should probably research this a bit more so that we can talk about it in depth, but there's a publishing company out of the UK that they just, at the tail end of 2016, right before Dorico's reveal, not the reveal, but before the release, they switched from Finale to Sibelius because they're like, hey, it's the composer's tool. And someone from that company has literally just said they just bought a 5-year contract with Avid for Sibelius. And now it's like, well, crud. I mean, because now you've got Dorico, which more and more composers are switching to by the minute almost. And you've got this publishing company and probably others too, small and large, that are now they're up a creek because they're either still with Finale or they finally switched to Sibelius. And now the composer base is strongly swinging towards Dorico, particularly for people that haven't quite updated Sibelius in a while, or they've been using the same copy of Finale for years. So I think I feel bad for them, but I think it's kind of funny that stuff's happening, and in the world of software that stuff happens all the time. Like, I don't remember what the software was before Adobe Premiere for video editing, but I want to say it was an early version of Sony Vegas for video editing, and when the industry switched, it was just like, oh, it'll never catch on. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, 5 years later, everybody's on Adobe Premiere but us. We should probably be on Adobe Premiere. So it's just funny, and I think it's finally caught up to notation, because notation software is as big a part of the composition process as actually sitting at the piano and hammering it out yourself these days. So I don't know. I think it's really interesting, and this will be really exciting to follow going forward. More and more schools are starting to add Dorico classes instead of Finale and Sibelius. So I think it's going to be really astounding to see what happens. But I don't know. Do you have any closing thoughts about this?
Hooray for capitalism! Yeah,
there you go.
Well, this is capitalism working right. Competition.
It spurs development.
Right, it spurs innovation, it spurs development, and customers will choose the option that best suits them and that's best for their pocketbook. Which I don't have Dorico at the moment. I haven't switched to it yet.
What's Dorico?
I don't think it's much more. It's not any more expensive than Sibelius. I don't believe.
No, in fact, I think the crossgrade is cheaper.
Right.
Than switching to Sibelius from Finale. So
right.
Yeah, I don't think it's much cheaper. I think it's just a matter of like $10 or something. I mean, I don't know. It is interesting, and now there's actually choice. Because for years, actually, the general thought of people heavily in the editing and annotation industry, and I do a lot of editing and copying for money, and I for a long time, as have a lot of people, have thought Sibelius is the composer's tool, Finale is the editor's dream, and that was very true. But now you've got this software that's like, so I wear both these hats. It's just like, well, neither of us can claim anything anymore. This is bad. Guys, we need to come up with something. Kind of like, there was something similar this year. This is slightly off topic, but it is very relevant to it. There was something, with that in the computer industry, because AMD, long the underdog, Intel, long the overlord of CPUs. AMD released something called the Ryzen chip, and Intel literally had no response. And I'm laughing because that's been happening to Sibelius and Finale at the same time. And it's just like, see guys, this is what can happen. You sit on your laurels too long, you think, oh, I don't need to develop this. It's perfect. Doesn't need any more innovation. Oh, crud. We should have been having those. We should have been having those development meetings, guys.
I just did the calculation. So the regular version of Dorico is about, it looks to be the price of 1/25th of a Bitcoin. So if you have a Bitcoin laying around, just 1/25th of your Bitcoin. So you still have 24/25ths of your Bitcoin left.
Really, that much of a Bitcoin?
Something like a Bitcoin is down to like 15,000 now.
Okay, yeah, I was up to like 20 grand. Oh, by the way, quick funny thing for you. This is also slightly off topic, but I have to tell you guys, and I have to tell Jacob, and this is like the only time I'm gonna get to talk to him for a few days. So you're familiar with Monroe, our friend, right? Mm-hmm. He once tried to sell me 6 Bitcoins when they were worth basically $3 a piece. I told him no.
Dude, you'd be so rich right now.
I know, and I told my family that because they were like, yeah, well, and nobody knew about it, and I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't either. My friend Monroe was trying to sell it to me. He was trying to sell me 6 of them for like $18 one time. In fact, he was knocking them down to $10 because he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. And Ashley was like, what?
Somebody's got to tell him to sell and sell fast.
Oh, no, he doesn't still have them. He ended up, like, giving them away, because, remember, they were literally worth just dirt at that point, because this was, like, 5 years ago. I mean, It was literally worth less than dirt.
Another one of our friends, another composer, Selka's her name. Selka, she goes to, she's at USC right now.
Her name is Selka.
Yeah, I said Selka.
Yes, I know. I was just stating.
Yes. Posted on social media some time ago about somebody gave her like half of a Bitcoin and now she has a bunch of money. So, yeah. But
fun. But yeah, so see, it's that stupid stuff. Everybody always laughs when it's like, oh, you're holding on to that useless piece of garbage. It's like, you never know. You never know.
I wish, of course, I wish, it's now it's like, well, what if I'd gotten some Bitcoin back then? But,
Yeah, well, no one could have predicted it. And honestly, the scary part is, it still doesn't have any legitimate value.
Well,
that's the truly scary part about
Bitcoin.
No
money has legitimate value. All money is just what people agree it is.
I know, but however, you look at we'll talk about that another day. But either way, so
this is really off topic.
Yeah, so it's really hard to look at the situation right now with Dorico and not sit there and just kind of laugh and be like, like you have to imagine Avid and Make Music both sitting there, probably at their year-end meeting. They're probably sitting there like, hey guys, how come we haven't been having these marketing meetings so we can get more sales? And they're probably sitting there like, we were supposed to be having marketing meetings? I don't know, it's really funny at this point. Anyways, so moving on from that, we spent way too long on that topic, but honestly it was a fun one. We'll go into details on that another time. So Let's see here. Next, I guess let's talk about the ASCAP YouTube agreement. You want to take this one, Jacob?
Yeah, you know way more about the ASCAP YouTube agreement than I do.
Okay.
So
Well, basically, well, I mean, you know what you need to know about it. Basically, for a long time, people have used YouTube as an illegitimate source of, just listening music. And it's been really hard for composers to get their cut from there. And ASCAP and BMI, I forgot to write to BMI on there. Oops. But ASCAP and BMI, they finally reached an agreement with YouTube that allows for, proper compensation to composers. And the details are really complicated, but basically it's part of essentially what they're calling fair and equal use, and basically it makes it to where I can make a let's play video, let's say, of me playing Call of Duty or some other random game, and I can have a soundtrack on there, let's just say something that Jacob wrote, and I have it on there, and I am therefore getting ad revenue on my video. But now, with this, I still keep my ad revenue. However, that ad revenue is slightly reduced for me. I don't see it on my end. It's on the back end. And the small percentage that would be owed to Jacob for his, quote, services of having his music included are now sitting there for him to use if he claims that video. So that's the only tricky part, is you have to claim the video. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
and I mean, if those who have used YouTube in the last couple of years, record companies have been cooperating with YouTube for a while now. You see a lot of music is now posted officially on YouTube by the record company. A lot of recorded music, because if somebody's going to post it on YouTube and somebody's going to watch it anyway. So they might as well post it and make money from.
Actually, that's not the logic. You want to know the logic? And this is actually kind of funny. It's actually easier to defend the copyright on YouTube if you already have that video on YouTube, because it is easier to file a claim as this is a copy of my video than this is a copy of my content that doesn't exist. So it's actually just a huge deterrent, is what it is, but it's effective. Kind of.
Yeah, and also, it's corporations adapting to the market, which it seems to be working. I mean, and we've talked about last week, recorded music sales are actually up. With that not being streaming, official, legal streaming, as well as CDs and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
it's in general up.
Right.
Which is shocking.
So we're seeing an upturn in the industry, which hopefully continues to rise as we go forward into 2018.
Yeah, here's hoping it does. Then also, you want to talk about the Spotify nonsense?
We already talked about them getting sued.
Yeah, I guess we did, but basically, they got sued multiple times this year. It was great.
But I mean, we've talked about Spotify in other capacities on this show, about concerns about big data threatening artist development, and the concerns with Spotify and other streaming services that if the music industry could become so algorithm based that we kind of lose that sense of discovering an artist, both as a listener and as a as a record producer or something like that. And if we're just relying on data, big data and algorithms to generate what is put out there, then there's a chance we could lose a lot of great music, a lot of great songwriters that make music that, well, A, doesn't appeal to the algorithm, or B, they're just on the edge of being good enough to draw an audience, but they need some help, some development from a record company or producer.
Right.
So there's multiple concerns with Spotify, both on the copyright front and on the impending technocracy front. Something to watch in the coming year.
Yeah, well,
and
I think it's been interesting with that. I mean, I agree. it does have dangers. However, I think it'll be fine in the end. I think it might be a little scary going a little forward though. So
Well,
next year might not be great with that, but
I don't think we're never going to have a musical utopia in which record companies are going to make decisions based on artistic merit. It's always going to be about the money, you know, when you're a corporation and you're trying to make money. So I mean,
right.
Ultimately, this is just another way for corporations to make money. Could it, and whether or not it enables mass production, so to speak, of music, we'll have to see. I mean, we still, and we mentioned this when we talked about this weeks ago. Ultimately, though, you know, we as listeners are responsible for what we decide to listen to. So, Spotify may be manipulating listeners into listening to what they want, but if you that still doesn't stop you from going on the internet and searching what you want to listen to. So,
right. However, that goes into different debates about, you know, is the user responsible, you know, free will, and then also just, you know, are you going to take the time to click the extra button?
And the other online thing that feeds into that we don't have listed here, but we should at least mention is the net neutrality repeal, which has not yet gone into effect and may never go into effect, depending on what Congress decides to do. But it's also something to keep.
Please be smart.
An eye on.
It's a long shot at this point, but I'm still holding on hope.
Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of debate about that. Of course, most of you listeners probably know the concerns at this point that ISPs could charge extra for accessing certain sites and such like that. We won't go into a bunch of detail on it today, but again, something else to watch for, something to be aware of in the online music world.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the online music world, the kind of our next item for our year in review is SoundCloud's imminent demise. Supposedly imminent demise, but it's not looking good for them.
They're gonna die.
Like as we've talked about multiple times on this show, SoundCloud isn't really making any money. Their business has downsized considerably in the past year, and it is rather doubtful whether they will.
60% employment cut.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a minor change.
We're not talking Dunder Mifflin. Oh, you got to fire one guy in your office, you know.
Yeah, it was literally including a poor sucker who had just quit his job, moved to the Germany office, and before even his first official day there, and he had moved his family there. Before even his first day, there is a meeting that he is required to be at, and at that meeting, he was listed as one of the people that was being let go.
Oh my.
Yeah. I mean, for those that don't know, essentially the way Spotify did it was they had a meeting. It was like on a Wednesday morning.
Spotify?
Not Spotify, SoundCloud. SoundCloud had a meeting. See, they both suck. So SoundCloud, they just had a big corporate email sent out like, there's a mandatory meeting, 100%. No one can miss this. You don't go anywhere else. You're at this meeting. And it was a video conference meeting. So obviously it's like, okay, this is going to be pretty important, you know? Because normally when that stuff happened at Spotify, it was stuff like, oh, we're pushing a new thing. Oh, we're taking this out. Oh, we're adding this in. And they had the usual thing there of, okay, yeah, there's a little buffet table with lots of breakfast items, all that kind of stuff. So no one really expected it. And it was just like, so Spotify's doing really not Spotify. So SoundCloud is doing really terribly. And we're not doing so hot. And then at the end of this little 20-minute meeting, it was just like, and your supervisors now have lists of people that will no longer be working for the company as a result of this. And that's how you found out. And you pretty much had to leave that day because they couldn't pay you past that day.
Right.
Like, it was really bad. And yeah, that one guy is probably the most screwed guy out there. Like, he was able to win a major suit against them, fortunately. But
Well, that's good. I mean, losing your job's one. I mean, layoffs happen. It's unfortunate, but I
before you
mean,
even have the job, after you move there, after being recruited to a different
right,
country with your family, it's like a
right.
6 month
And
process to.
and at that point, you can reasonably claim that at some point SoundCloud should have informed him that maybe you shouldn't do this.
Yeah. Oh, and the
Right.
other thing that someone pointed out, and this is one of the former employees talking about this. He's like, so they're
Mhm.
talking about, oh, we don't have money for XYZ. He's like, dude, there's a buffet table in my office every day with just free to take food. He's like, and it's not like, oh, you got some hot wings and like your French fries. It's actually like good food. Like you got like, your prime rib, you got fresh dinner rolls, you got fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, all that kind of stuff. Like it's a spread, and it's just like,
Well,
okay,
I mean, to be fair, that's still almost certainly a blip in their budget.
probably, but that was probably enough to pay for several employees.
Well,
Because keep in mind, they've
I
got
don't
like 8 offices. And if each
real.
of these offices is doing that every single day, I mean,
It is kind of wasteful. It doesn't necessarily make a dent in the budget, but it does make you question
what
where
are their priorities?
their priorities are. Right, right.
But yeah, either way, so that's that's interesting at the very least.
No.
So moving on from SoundCloud.
Newport.
Yes, I do want to talk about this. So this is probably, I want to say, probably the most bad news that we got this year. And the Newport Contemporary Festival, I don't think we've really mentioned it much on Composer Talk, but
it happened before we started.
this happened over the summer, and I mean it's still trickling through right now, but the big wave of it is over. But basically, a kid, Paul Van Engelen, with no credentials, by the way, swears he studied in France, but nothing to prove it. Nobody over there even knows him. He comes back, and he is literally living in his mom's basement. And he decides, I'm going to host this contemporary music festival. And with the name Newport attached to it, your name automatically associates it with, okay, Newport Jazz Festival, Newport, contemporary artists, all that stuff. So, okay, this is going to be pretty good. So he used the name of Newport, which, I mean, you can do that. It's just the name of a town. You can do that. And he ends up basically setting up the greatest con scheme of all time. He manages to get the Philip Glass Ensemble. The Philip Glass Ensemble. Not the Philip Glass Ensemble. Featuring Philip himself coming as a guest presenter and composer for the event. And 2 or 3 other headline composers that I will not name, just because it's not as critical as this, who were supposed to be there as featured composers. And basically featuring all contemporary music with the exception of a couple pieces by Aaron Copland. Just because, it's an American music festival, we gotta include Aaron. You have to. It's just kind of like what you do. But, yeah, you gotta throw him in there. And at the first rehearsal, and keep in mind, he got like 140 musicians signed up for this. And he was selling tickets and merch and all this stuff. And the first rehearsal comes, and then finally someone says it, because no one had gotten paid. He kept telling people, oh yeah, money's coming, it takes a while for this stuff to process. One of my big donors is, just a little slow, that kind of stuff. And he managed to not only get all these people to go there without having a dime in their pocket, including the Philip Glass Ensemble, but it took until the first rehearsal of the orchestra for, I think it was one of the violists, just stood up and said, where's our money? Or no, it wasn't the first rehearsal. It was the last rehearsal before the first performance. So it's like the day before the first performance, on like June 1st or whatever. July 1st, sorry. And he is literally like, oh, well, my big donor, he literally just finished everything today. And so about a third of the musicians just walked out. Which, good for them. They should have. I would have walked out way before that, but they walked out. Good for them. And then the next morning, 2/3, they still had enough to perform the piece, so whatever. The they get there, and about 5 minutes before rehearsal, the ensemble manager gets a text message. So does everyone else. There is no money. Money didn't come through. Go home. Festival's canceled. And now, this is a festival that was supposed to take place all month. And first of all, also, he ended up hosting it in a high school, which that should have been clue number 1 for some people. But, so this guy got like an 8 or 10 show lineup of contemporary composers, commissioned works, you know, lots of people performing stuff, you know, all sorts of stuff. And people also knew something was up because he was sitting there on the conductor's podium. You can see my hand right now. He was shaking like this. The principal cellist said that it was worse than seeing a new graduate conductor. Like, it's bad. And this kid is now being sued in so many small claims courts across the country. It's not even funny, because he got his musicians from all up and down the East Coast. So he is getting sued by so many people, and he's sitting there, he still claims he had a big donor that he's not going to name to besmirch their name, but honestly, at that point, you have to put that person's name out so that the musicians union workers who were there know whose house to go egg. Like,
I mean, the courts could probably subpoena that information. Like,
yeah, he still has not
to
supplied that to anyone.
Yeah, like,
he refuses to show up. He is just accepting the suits. He has got about $400,000 that he's got to pay off at this point. Because $100,000 of that's just the Philip Glass Ensemble showing up.
It's like you know really puts you know if you're listening out there and you have a lot of student loans, be glad you're not this guy.
Yeah, he's got about double what the average person with a master's degree has. I mean,
yeah, this. And on some level, you got to feel sorry for the guy. And who knows at what point, you know, whether I kind of doubt it was a con scheme from the beginning. The dude's in over his head, but at some point he should have admitted, I don't have enough money to do this. I have to cancel instead of dragging these musicians all the way through the rehearsal cycle.
See, but here's my argument against that, though. I think it was a con from the beginning. I don't think there ever was a donor. I think he was just hoping that he could get his name out there as a conductor. And yes, he was in over his head, but because here's all the things wrong with this whole situation. He got musicians, first of all, to sign up with no down payment. Just saying, he must be really good smooth talker. He went out of his way to get the Philip Glass Ensemble, and he convinced them, hey, this high school auditorium, which the Philip Glass Ensemble was like, we're not playing in a high school gymnasium. Are you stupid? And he's like, no, it's an auditorium. It's really nice. And, you know, he told them some BS story about, oh, yeah, this is really significant auditorium to, you know, the community, all that. And, you know, it's like the second best venue in town as far as acoustics. And, you know what? The ensemble manager was finally like, fine, we'll do it. We don't like it, but we'll do it. So there's problem number 2. Problem number 3, all these credentials that he lists that he has, they don't exist. You can't find record of them anywhere. He says he studied in France. No one over there knows him. Like, people have gone to, because he won't say who he studied with, but he has, I mean, there's record of him traveling to France, but never studying with anyone, because
Nadia Boulanger.
Yeah, he probably tried to claim that. But no, like, people have gone through, because there's a list of about 100, 200 people that people from the United States go to France to study music with. None of them know who he is. And it's a small, tight-knit community, kind of like it is, you know, in, like, the Springfield area or the OKC area. Like, people know each other. Nobody knows who this kid is. And his conducting skills weren't, it wasn't just shaky conducting, it was just atrocious. He didn't know how to conduct a 3-beat. So, this kid literally has no credentials, no money, no support, no anything. And it's just, yeah, you're saying they're doing 3-beat right now. It's not that hard. Even Jacob can do it. I can't see what your hands are doing. I can only see. I can only see you doing this. You can't see what I'm doing, but either way.
No.
But yeah, so either way, it was a con from the beginning, in my opinion, because
Well,
he was in over his head from the beginning, and I don't think he ever had a donor. I think that he was just hoping that he'd get by with it on ticket sales, and then he realized how much this stuff actually costs. I think it's astounding that this kid is still alive.
Whether a con or just a big mistake, we can agree that this really puts the epic back in epic fail.
Yes, it really does. And for the past 6 months, I've been telling people just don't pull a Van Anglen. Anyway, so yeah, so that I think that was probably the biggest shock factor of the year. So moving on from that, you want to talk about the sexual harassment stuff?
Yes. Most of you listeners have probably already heard about this, but we've had a lot of sexual harassment allegations against powerful men in the entertainment industry in the past several months of 2017. Classical music world has been no exception. Of course, the big name that's been accused is it Mark Levine?
Something Levine, yeah.
I'm blanking as Mark Levine.
It's Levine, yeah.
Right, Levine, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra conductor, who I can't remember if he's been let go or not, but is on leave at least, considering pending allegations. This is something to be watching going into 2018 because the flood of allegations shows no signs of letting up. Classical music, classical music has for a long time, especially has had power issues with conductors. In the 20th century, the whole maestro mythology that grew up around conductors, that has ebbed somewhat going into the 21st century, but its legacy is still there, we don't really need to get into the political aspect of these accusations today. Right. I think that's kind of beyond the scope of the show, but it is something to be looking for, and I think as musicians, it brings to mind something that we all need to keep in mind. That is power dynamics in music. Well, I know you and I are both studying composition, going for advanced degrees, looking to go into academia, to eventually become teachers. Other listeners of the show might become conductors or private teachers one day. And it's something that I think it's important to always keep in mind how your use of power in whatever position you're in affects those who are under your authority in that context.
Right.
And reminds us that I think it's important in the culture within classical for everyone to not be afraid to speak truth to power, and to forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, essentially every industry, every area has powerful people, and it's ultimately the responsibility of everyone to not put too much stock in a person's position,
right.
Judge people based on their actions, and to kind of, I think, push back against whether you're in a position of power or not. Push back against the kind of, in classical music we have a special genius mythology around prominent people in our field, right. And we want, and that's what I've been trying to say, dribbling over my words, but we want to push back against the notion that the great artist can do no wrong.
Correct.
Right, because the great artist isn't necessarily a good person.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shame, and this hits a lot of different sizes of groups. It hit my hometown symphony several years ago. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's a shame, but
yes, and in so far, what if the accusations that are true? if you've done things like this, I mean, you have no business being in a position of power.
Exactly.
Yes. So
I totally agree. And,
mhm.
this is just also a word of caution, and this is an unfortunate word of caution, but men in particular, just be careful. Just because these things are so rampant these days that even if you do something that is probably not harassment, but is like borderline, just don't, especially if you're in the world of music, because it can really have long-term effects on you. Because some of these cases are literally just like a misunderstanding that's only understood years later, and by that point, the name's besmirched. So be careful, be
and
cautious.
unfortunately, we don't, we not everyone, is always in a position to judge these cases, which is why hopefully or organizations will conduct internal investigations, and hopefully justice will be done. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but
Yeah.
like I said, I don't think we need to get into the political aspects.
Yeah, we don't. But either way, it's running rampant. Be cautious. Make sure that you're doing the due cause, so to speak, and report things as you see them. But anyway, so moving on from that, another thing about kind of allegations and lawsuits and all that. So a long-running story now. Back in 2014, I believe it was. Martin O'Donnell, a significant composer in the world of video game composition, even just in general, for his work on the Halo franchise as the composer. He was fired without cause from his company, Bungie. Dang it, Bungie. But, so basically, he ended up winning his lawsuits, and he actually not only won the lawsuits, but early this year, in fact, I believe it was late May, he won the final suit, which was that he is entitled to a portion of the Destiny game sales, which, for those that don't know, he did the initial melody work, basically, for Destiny, and he did all the trailer stuff for Destiny before he was just fired without cause. So I think that is good, because it means that courts are willing to go back and retroactively fix things if you were wronged. And also good that, a composer got his dues. I mean, he was fired without due cause, and he was, honestly, why would you fire Martin O'Donnell? It'd be like firing John Williams. It's like, why? How stupid do you have to be? Not only that, but try to say that you don't owe him anything. Like, come on, man. That'd be like, in Star Wars, for instance, let's just say you watch all the trailers, it's the brilliant John Williams music, you do the opening title crawl, John Williams music, and then the rest is not John Williams. And they just try to cut John Williams out entirely. It's like, no, he brought people in with that music. Like, you can't cheat him out of that. It was a similar situation for Marty. He got his fair dues, though, and, I've been following this since it first broke in 2014, and now it's reached its full conclusion. I'm happy he got justice. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. Composer got his dues. Good job, Martin O'Donnell.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'll let you take the wing for these next few.
Yes, finally, to kind of close our show today, I just wanted to draw your attention, your watchers, to some newly composed pieces first premiered or recorded in 2017, many of which we haven't gotten the chance to discuss this year, but which you should probably go check out. First one of these kind of the big, I guess, the big name piece of the year is John Adams' opera, Girls of the Golden West. If you haven't listened to John Adams' other operas, you should, because they're great. But yeah, I mean, John Adams is one of the biggest opera composers of the 20th and 21st centuries. I don't think this is available on recording yet. I believe it's still showing in LA. But when it does come out on DVD, I highly recommend listening to it. I haven't had the chance to go see it, but I will grab it up when it does become available, certainly.
We actually already have a copy on reserve for whenever it comes out at the Fine Arts Library, just so you know. Yeah, it's already been pre-ordered.
Mm-hmm. another opera to note is the Pulitzer Prize winning piece from 2017, which is Angel's Bone by Du Yoon, composer. Angel's Bone is it's an opera that deals with it's themed around sex trafficking and issues of sexual abuse. So a timely piece. Sex trafficking is a big issue. It's been obviously explored in media with movies like Taken, which isn't the most accurate depiction of the sex trafficking industry. But yeah, this is a Pulitzer Prize winner. Like many Pulitzer pieces, it's one that deals with contemporary social issues, and I think is a very timely opera. So that's a big one this year. And then we talked about earlier this year. We talked about all the Grammy nominated pieces. One rather important one is going to be Jennifer Higdon's viola concerto. Her violin concerto won the Pulitzer Prize 10 years ago. And I haven't had the chance to listen to this particular viola concerto yet, but I will be putting it on in my headphones in the new year, and
Right.
I'm going to encourage our listeners to do so as well, because Higdon's a really good composer.
She really is. She's one of my favorite contemporary composers. She's just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever end up listening to Cityscapes, by the way, like I told you to?
I don't remember you telling me to.
Cityscapes.
No, I haven't listened to that.
Okay, you need to.
I should probably write that down somewhere.
Yes, I have told you several times. You need to listen to that.
You've maybe told me once, and it was probably like in the last week of school or something, when I was frantically trying to finish a piece.
No, I always try. I've been telling people about that piece since I was a junior in high school. There's no way you haven't heard me tell you about it. Anyways,
you've probably mentioned it, but yeah, good. Higdon, a good composer. That's one I'd recommend you check out. And finally, in film score news for this year, we talked about Golden Globe nominees a few weeks ago. I'm sure we'll get into the Oscar-nominated film scores once those come out. But Hans Zimmer's Dunkirk score has been getting a lot of acclaim. And Zimmer, you probably if you're watching, you probably know who Hans Zimmer is. I mean, very important film composer.
Especially of the last 15 years.
Yes. And Dunkirk's been getting, both as a film and the music has been getting a lot of acclaim. And it's kind of on my slate to watch for this week. I'm like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm spending a little time getting caught up on all the art stuff from the past year. And then, but that's one that I think is going, that it's I think kind of an early favorite for the Oscar at this point.
Right.
And then of course we can't let this go by without mentioning Star Wars, The Last Jedi with John Williams score. My sister is sitting back there laughing because I've been talking nonstop about Star Wars for the past month.
Well, why wouldn't you? It's literally the best film that's ever been created by anyone ever. Hollywood just needs to stop. Like, they're done.
Yeah, of course, the Star Wars scores in general have always been great. John Williams, great film composer. So that's one to check out as well. If you haven't seen the movie or listened to the score, definitely go see the movie. Because Zach, is that you?
That's the cat. I've been holding her up to the microphone.
I didn't know if you were still. Well, I guess I knew you weren't still on vacation because you're doing this from your computer at home. Yeah. So, but the cat. Hello, Sorry. Symphony, or that's Symphony.
That was Symphony. Yeah, that was.
That sounds like Symphony. Hello, Symphony.
Yes.
Have you missed me?
They missed your room. I had to go in there to check something out because we heard a noise, and she like darted right in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you more about that later. But so yes, the Star Wars score.
Yes.
Phenomenal. But lots of good references to the old scores and to the new score from Force Awakens, and brilliant portrayals.
Also a Beethoven 9 reference in there to the end. I think anyway. That's how I interpret it. It's the theme. trying to remember. Did you catch that, Zach, on your second viewing or third viewing?
Fourth. I've heard the part that people are talking about. I'm not going to talk about it just in case spoilers, but I think it can be argued, but I personally don't see it.
I don't know. I mean, it can be argued either way. I mean, just my first reaction when I heard it was, oh, it's an Ode to Joy reference.
Right.
But I mean, I suppose we'll never know unless we go ask John Williams himself.
I mean, I got time. Let's go. No, I was kidding.
Just call him, look him up in the phone book. Yeah, but anyway, that's our year in review. So happy New Year. We're a few days into now.
Happy New Year indeed. It's again kind of an eventful year. The last couple weeks kind of puttered out as far as news, just because holidays. People take a break. People don't do as much stupid stuff during the holiday. Well, they do, just not publicly stupid stuff. But yeah, so
people getting drunk on New Year's Eve is not a topic of discussion that really is suitable for composer talk.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a good year. Lots of eventful stuff. Lots of good triumphs for composers. Couple scary moments, but we'll see how that goes as we move forward. But yeah, it was a good 2017. Here's to 2018. We'll be back next week and the week after that and the week after that and the week after. We'll be back perpetually with more news and less of the year in review stuff.
To our first hate mail of 2018.
Yeah. All right. See ya.
Adios.